Using 2 special weapons has always been strong in Destiny 2, but with some of the sandbox changes made in the past year or so, the loadout has seen a huge surge in popularity, and rightfully so. In this video, I will explain why double special is in the best spot it's ever been, as well as how to most effectively use 2 special weapons in every activity in the game. This video will be a bit on the longer side, so if you want to skip to a certain section of the video you find most useful, the timestamps are in the description. Since the end of Beyond Light, Bungie's sandbox team has made a host of changes that have, whether intentionally or not, created an environment where double special has become not just preferred, but the dominant weapon configuration of choice in almost any Destiny 2 activity. Starting with the introduction of more powerful special weapons originating with Martyr's Retribution during Season of Dawn, all the way down to the recent Lightfall mod system changes, I'll be going over the history of changes that have affected double special viability over time. Increase in special weapon diversity and viability, Season 9 to present. Since release, Destiny 2 has enjoyed a slow increase in the number of special weapons available. On top of this, due to the sandbox team's desires to push players to play newer content to obtain more powerful weapons, these special weapon options have undoubtedly grown stronger as well, a phenomenon commonly referred to as power creep. Though not necessarily unhealthy, there is no doubt that the addition of certain weapon types has allowed special weapons to dominate more and more of the game's weapon space. A few notable examples include Martyr's Retribution, the very first waveframe, Salvager's Salvo, the first viable add-clear lightweight GL, Forbearance, the first chain reaction waveframe, Ignition Code, a blinding GL with slide shot, and Heritage and Succession, 2 weapons that bypass the majority of their archetypal weaknesses through formerly raid-exclusive perks. In a sandbox without waveframes or salvo, the sandbox lacks hard-hitting splash damage legendary special weapons. The same goes for Ignition Code and its successors, filling the role of the lower utility kinetic slot with the incredibly useful blinding or now disorienting grenades perk. Bungie's decision to push for the diversification of special weapons and then the layering of powerful splash damage perks like Chain Reaction on top of these new options has no doubt increased the viability of special weapons since past years of Destiny 2. Proliferation of blinding and disorienting grenades, Season 14 to present. As mentioned in the previous section, blinding GLs started getting a lot more attention during Season of the Splicer, when Ignition Code was first introduced. Not only was it the first blinding GL in the kinetic slot, freeing up the energy slot, but it also rolled slide shot, allowing players to blind essentially an entire room at a time passing through. The implications of such a strategy did not go unnoticed. Players speedrunning Grandmaster difficulty Nightfalls, the hardest game-imposed combat challenge in the game, would go on to use this exact weapon to blind entire swarms of GM tier enemies in aggressive gameplay for the next 2 years. In order to understand double special and why it is so strong, you have to understand what it's competing against. If we're talking about content where enemies are so dangerous that blinding them is actually useful, we're generally talking about GMs and master raids. Before the explosion in player aggression in these activities towards the end of Beyond Light, the way players approached this content was vastly different compared to how it is today. Shooting one enemy at a time using a primary, using the advantage of long distance to avoid deadly one-shot attacks, only moving forward once a section was almost entirely clear. Damage in Destiny is typically balanced by distance. Longer range weapons tend to have lower damage, and this tends to apply to almost everything, even outside primaries. To any attentive observer, it is evident that the extremely close quarters, melee and sword builds that came to the forefront of top-level Master Plus gameplay would not be possible without something to control all the enemies that would normally instantly kill them. In short, the proliferation of blinding GLs helped create an environment where players can be more aggressive without being punished in harder content, allowing for higher damage special weapon options where previously a long-range primary weapon would be preferred. Legendary Trace Rifles, 30th anniversary to present. Trace rifles, much like waveframes, are another example of special weapons taking over more of the weapon domain that they once did not inhabit. Before waveframes, special weapons were largely single target, inappropriate for splash damage instances in most cases. In a similar vein, until Retrace Path was introduced, legendary special weapons did not have the capability to shoot objectives or a high number of projectiles without wasting an unnecessary amount of ammo. Think about having to shoot a button with a grenade launcher or a shotgun. As such, primaries were useful for when you needed to shoot something, regardless of how much damage you needed to do to it. Trace rifles take this concept completely into their domain. Good stats, the range of a pulse rifle, the damage profile of an SMG, all with a huge mag, large reserves, and a good host of utility perks on every single option to release since Retrace Path. The fact that you can essentially run a souped up primary with useful utility perks like Shoot to Loot, Adaptive Munitions, Demolitionist, Lead from Gold, and Repulsor Brace, alongside the benefits of Double Special, is a big reason why there is almost no reason to run a primary in the current Destiny 2 sandbox. Introduction of Gjallarhorn, 30th anniversary to present. Gjallarhorn is an interesting piece to the puzzle, since it's twice removed from this discussion. It is neither a legendary weapon nor a special weapon, and its exotic perk affects explicitly power weapons. However, Gjallarhorn is part of the changes that happened during and after the 30th anniversary DLC that swept the speedrunning and endgame meta forever. The addition of Pack Hunter buffing legendary rockets by 30% while also giving them massively increased ad clear potential made rockets a much more ammo efficient option, easing up on the strictness with which one had to choose kinetic and energy weapons. Instead of using a primary to kill a group of red bar enemies, you could just shoot a rocket at a nearby champion, decimating both the champ and the enemies, perhaps opting to use something like Witherhoard or a Blinding GL to provide you with additional utility instead. Increase in artifact independent champion stuns, Season 15 to present. A huge problem with running double special in the past was the lack of artifact support for special weapon stunning. At most you'd get one expensive stun mod, and it might be on a weapon type that is typically unfavorable in a master level environment, like a shotgun or fusion rifle. Anti-barrier mods in particular had this problem. While Divinity and Bastion were good options that had been used in the past as reliable instant intrinsic stuns, the tides didn't turn for double special completely until we got Arbalest, as a ranged hit scan, one-shot, one-stop shop for all shield-piercing needs over the Lament. Now, if you had unfavorable primary barrier mods for the season, you could just throw an Arbalest and have a 1 ammo instant body shot stun from essentially infinite range on a GM tier champ. Where previous seasons saw teams plinking away together against the barrier champ's shield with primaries, Arbalest made stunning barriers a breeze for individual players. The final nail in the coffin, though, has to have been the Lightfall subclass verb stun changes. Today, you can go into a GM with 0 artifact mods on and blaze through with nothing but a chill clip Riptide and an Arbalest on your team, so why even bother using a primary? This is a question that gets harder to answer every season, especially given Bungie's clear intention of adding more intrinsic stun exotics and stun integration into the game. Focus on legendary power weapons, Season 15 to present. Some of the most lucrative special options are exotics, like Divinity or Witherhoard, but these options are locked behind using a legendary power weapon. Thankfully, the introduction of Gjallarhorn, as well as consistently better legendary power options every season, has created a sandbox where the former reign of exotic power weapons has greatly diminished. Where you used to see Laments, Sleepers, Deathbringers, and Anarchies, today you see 1 Gjallarhorn, 2 Hotheads, and before the season, probably 3 legendary linears. Thanks to this freeing up of the exotic slot, players are more freely able to choose weapons like the extremely ammo-efficient Witherhoard, which lends itself more to double special loadouts with its slot versatility. Shift to ability focus and 3.0 subclasses, Season 16 to present. In addition to Gjallarhorn, another huge meta-defining change that came to the game after Season of the Lost was the subclass 3.0 changes. Touch of Flame Fusion Grenades, Touch of Thunder Storm Grenades, and Jolting Combination Blow paved the way for ability builds that were magnitude stronger than they were a year prior. Builds that continue to be so strong that they easily outshine anything but the most potent power weapon combos. The double special ammo problem becomes a lot less of an issue when a single grenade can kill an entire group of GM tier enemies and then some, all while refueling my abilities so I can have another go at it a short few seconds later. The 3.0 sandbox is one that is so potent that almost every aspect of gameplay can be handled by abilities, leaving your weapons open to be whatever you want them to be. In fact, your weapons often revolve around your abilities. Think about the fact that people literally run a Blinding GL, a 1-2 punch shotgun, and tractor cannon in GMs now. When most of my resource expenditure on ad clear and damage comes from abilities, cooldowns I can refresh infinitely, I use a whole lot less ammo. Running Witherhoard and a Trace Rifle with Starfire Fusions is probably the most generally effective loadout in Destiny 2 right now, and after running it for about a year, I don't think I've ever run out of special ammo when I've needed it. Activity burns, surges, overcharges, Season 16 to present. This change sort of ties into the next one, but it speaks to the concepts I've already discussed. Increasing player damage output through burns, which have now been replaced with surges and overcharges, only further serves to reduce the amount of ammo players need to kill enemies, which in turn increases double special viability. Resilience buff and removal of punishing modifiers, Season 16 to present. This is another big one. blinding grenades were one thing, but being able to tank GM tier enemies much more easily even while they're not blind was a big factor in the increased viability of more aggressive, damage-oriented loadouts involving 2 special weapons. Again, a big theme here is the shift from passive, scared for your life, ranged primary gameplay to an in-your-face, aggressive, ability rocket special playstyle. Environmental and activity-specific modifiers like the Glassway's Bellman's algorithm and match game being gone means that loadouts are a lot more flexible and less punishing to players who choose to use more burst-oriented, aggressive loadouts. Special Finisher and Armor 3.0 changes, Season 20 to present. Finally, we arrive at the present. I would say with this change especially, the ammo consideration when it comes to special weapons is completely gone. Bungie has literally introduced a system where Special Finisher does not only not require super energy, but instead can be spammed as long as there are enemies to finish. Whether or not the double empowered finisher stacks on stacks loop is intended or not is something we don't know, but regardless, it is still incredibly easy to gain 3 armor charges in order to make ammo, much easier than it is gaining a third of your super like in the past. Now that we've talked about how double special has arrived to where it is today, let's talk about its raw advantages in a vacuum. They're quite simple and fall into 2 categories. Increased damage output. Double special allows for increased raw damage from your loadout, whether we're talking in a raw DPS sense or a general gameplay sense. For the former, obviously something like Izzy Slug Rocket or Izzy GL Rocket will overtake just Izzy Rocket in damage, and Double Slug will obviously do more damage than the single slug. Regarding the latter, running 2 special weapons means that your entire loadout is going to be doing more damage, and that there's no compromise. Once you play with double special enough, primary weapons literally feel like a handicap, like a gaping hole in your loadout. When you switch to a primary weapon, suddenly enemies take forever to kill when your wave frame used to just one-shot them. It's a disorienting feeling for sure. Increased ammo drops. This has been mentioned and tweaked by Bungie a few times in the past few years, but double special has an inherently increased chance to drop heavy ammo as well as more special ammo. It is a bit ironic that some who are opposed to double special bemoan the lack of ammo, for the opposite is true. It has been shown time and time again that using double special buffs the rate at which heavy ammo drops, and with knowledge of ammo manipulation, it can become even easier to manage your ammo as an intelligent player. While double special is almost universally the best weapon configuration to run in Destiny 2, there are a few notable exceptions that I wanted to touch on that I think are worth mentioning. Adaptive Munitions. Added with the Witch Queen DLC, Adaptive Munitions is a perk that seems largely centered around elemental shield breaking, something that is a foreign concept in today's sandbox where match game is a thing of the past. However, players quickly discovered that Adaptive Munitions also applies to the shield of a barrier champion. As a result, on certain primary weapons, Adaptive Munitions can cause them to scale up in damage so quickly that they can stun a GM tier barrier in a time frame only Arbalest can best. This is such an outlier in primary performance that in some rare instances, it can be worth sacrificing the add clear potency of one of your slots to take a pseudo Arbalest that doesn't consume your exotic slot. A favorite of mine on Starfire, for example, is Witherhoard and Insidious with enhanced Adaptive Munitions, which 2-burst GM barriers regardless of burn. With the addition of Radiant and other subclass verbs giving anti-barrier, this perk has become less important, but I still think it's worth mentioning as an exception to the double special rule. Shoot to loot. While shoot to loot can be found on weapons that are not primaries, notably trace rifles do not always have an associated champ stun mod. As a result, using something like an explosive payload scout rifle or a hand cannon can be effective in certain scenarios where the only thing you are using them for is stunning champions and shooting ammo bricks, like in a heavy focused Aeon team where you are almost exclusively using Wolfpack rockets to clear rooms and kill champs. Exotic primaries. Some exotic primaries are so good at what they do that they overshadow all legendary special options and come into their own niche. Primaries tend to lose out to special weapons as a result of being single target and low damage. If an exotic primary can overcome both these obstacles or provide some useful and unique benefit, it has a chance of being viable. Of the 50 or so exotic primaries in the game, only a handful of them pass this test. Trinity Ghoul is one. Its lightning rod chains are so easy to use, lethal, and surface independent that it is chosen even in low-level content speedrunning over options like Witherhoard and Forbearance. Osteostriga is another, as a result of its splash damage, lingering poison, and overflow potential. Risk Runner is another primary worth mentioning for its unique damage resistance effect, along with chaining splash damage in arc damage environments. There are a few others like Lumina and Le Monarch, but the list is relatively short, especially given that many exotics in this game are based on fun gimmicks or PvP gameplay rather than endgame viability. Solo content. In some solo content, especially content like GMs, the amount of damage a single player has to do is so high that it has the potential of exceeding the total amount a double special loadout can manage to output. While the ability changes have done a great amount of work in mitigating this, it is still possible that a solo player may need to run a primary in a particularly dense GM, or one where they cannot run an ability build that is efficient at handling enemies. Activities like solo GMs affect a very tiny part of the player base, but this is still something I wanted to mention because it is a notable example where primary use can be justified. Now that we've spent enough time explaining why double special is as good as it is, I'm going to go over how you can carefully select specific choices to best make use of 2 special ammo weapons. Intrinsic stun exotics. In champion-centered content like sectors and nightfalls, running an intrinsic stun exotic ranges from helpful to essential. Arbalest, Divinity, Bastion are all great options that have enough lethality to justify using your exotic slot. Splash damage. Running an ammo-efficient splash damage special weapon is necessary in a double special loadout if your abilities cannot cover ad clear. Arguably the most important component of a double special loadout, the obvious choices are Witherhoard and Forbearance, with other Wayframes and Salvager Salvo as slightly weaker options that fill the same role. Single target damage. Single target weapons like Izanagi's Burden and Recombination Heritage are also commonly used in double special loadouts. With abilities and rockets largely subsuming this role, these weapons are less significant nowadays, but they still see use in burst damage rotations in contexts like raids and dungeons. Utility weapons. Finally, utility weapons like the previously mentioned Ignition Code, as well as 1-2 punch shotguns, are incredibly important parts of double special loadouts. Without them, the aggressive ability-based damage meta that we have come to see today would not be anywhere near as potent. While melee builds have seen a significant decline since the nerf of 1-2 punch, and various melee exotics like Wormgod Caress, 1-2 punch shotguns can still be useful in some instances. Finally, here are some very common examples of double special loadouts that a lot of good players tend to use. Witherhoard Trace Rifle with Starfire Fusions, a Blinding GL Divinity and Starfire Fusions, a Blinding GL a 1-2 punch shotgun and Assassin's Cowl with Combination Blow, Izanagi's Burden and Forbearance, Izanagi's Burden and some sort of damage rotation weapon like Empty Vessel, Truth Teller, First and Last Out, Sojourner's Tale, Nessa's Ablation, Witherhoard Forbearance for ad clear, a Blinding GL Forbearance and some sort of exotic heavy, Arbalest and Forbearance is common in Nightfalls, Heritage Fortissimo No Reprieve, plus First and Last Out Sojourner's Tale or Nessa's Ablation as the classic double slug combo. These are all great examples of double special combos that players often tend to use. With the introduction of the Lightfall mod system, a lot of build crafting potential has been removed from the game, and as for double special, mods have come down to 3 specializations. These 3 groups are applicable to the rest of the game and are not necessarily exclusive to double special, but I'll still detail them here. Ammo. In day 1 and possibly longer Nightfall scenarios, sustainable ammo is generally the biggest issue for teams mod-wise. 1 Finder, 1 Scout, and 1 Generation mod, Super or Orb, plus either Scavengers or the Empowered Finisher cycle is recommended. As of now, running 2 Empowered Finisher, Special Finisher, and Stacks on Stacks allows you to infinite Special Finisher enemies, but even if this gets patched, Special Finisher will still be useful given how easy it is to get 3 armor charges. Supers. In most regular content, running Ashes to Assets or hands-on is most appropriate, given how easy it is to get a huge amount of grenade or melee kills nowadays. Ammo typically isn't an issue in casual content, and neither is outputting huge amounts of damage, so getting your super quickly is probably what your mod energy is best spent on. Damage. Finally, in raid and dungeon content where burst damage is the goal, running 3 surges, 3 for power or a 2-1 split, is a very easy way to increase your damage output by a significant amount for very little cost. All 3 of these specializations can be combined together to some extent, but these are the 3 considerations I would have when thinking about mods in Season 20. While ability viability changes from season to season, I wanted to give one example for each class of a strong build that pairs well with double special to the highest levels of content. All 3 of these builds are very potent and will significantly reduce the amount of ammo one would have to use if they were otherwise using an average subclass build. Starfire Protocol Fusions. Being able to dole out essentially infinite mini nukes every couple seconds that give super energy and completely refresh your class ability on a subclass with access to Well of Radiance is, needless to say, not very balanced. Assassin's Cowl Combination Blow. Constant invisibility, healing on melee kills, constant splash damage on jolting enemies after dodging, and high burst potential on champs and majors using 1-2 punch makes this one of the easiest high survivability builds this game has ever seen. Synthoceps Throwing Hammers. Extremely high damage, spammable, cure on hit powered melees that also leave lingering restoration sunspots in their wake, all with access to Healing Grenade and Ember of Torches. This build has been good for almost 2 years now, and it shows no signs of becoming any worse anytime soon. Although ammo is rarely an issue these days, there are still some mechanics that you can think about while using a double special loadout that will help you manage your ammo more efficiently. Efficient usage. Use your weapons and abilities in a more even, distributed flow of actions. If you're ever holding down a trace rifle on Starfire and you're complaining about running out of ammo, you're probably doing something wrong. If you're manually reloading Witherhoard and shooting it constantly, you're also probably doing something wrong. It is important to remember the function of your weapons and what they excel at, and where other weapons or perhaps abilities would be better suited. Opposite drop chance. Using special weapons is more likely to drop power ammo, and using power weapons is more likely to drop special ammo. This is especially true if you've gone for a long time only killing enemies using special weapons, switch to a power weapon and kill even just one enemy, and you are almost guaranteed to see a special brick drop. After playing with double special for thousands of hours, I can tell you that the game's ammo drop algorithm is designed to reward players that mix up which weapons they use frequently. Remember that the game calculates drops and similar information based on what weapon you are currently holding out, meaning you can kill an enemy with Witherhoard or something similar, and switch to a power weapon to achieve the same effect. Automatic pickup. Finally, remember that you can save bricks for later. Even if you move to another room in the environment, the game will automatically pick up bricks of ammo for you over time. So if you're full on ammo, don't go trying to restore 12 missing machine gun ammo with a brick that gives you 68. If you watch good players play endgame content, you'll often see them note where bricks are and come back for them later, or allow them to be picked up automatically later on in the activity. I get a lot of questions about double special loadouts from more casual players, and hopefully this video does a good job of comprehensively explaining why it's so good and how it came to be. If you have any questions or insights that I've missed, please make sure to leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to respond and discuss. That's all for now, but look forward to more videos in a similar vein to this one in the future.